there's thunder, there's lightning. John Nada. So I'm back from quite a lengthy absence in making any videos, and I'll probably go into that at some point in a separate video because it's kind of a lot to unpack. But basically, I think many of you knew that I was making a job change and moving, and so that took up quite a bit of time. And I'd been wanting to make a video, but just couldn't seem to find the time, or wasn't sure, as far as the subject matter, if I had really anything to talk about. When you're at work, you change a new job, go from one job to the other. Likability seems to play a huge role in a lot of things. I don't think this is anything that is new. I mean, I'm sure I've probably discussed this, several times, but it really does matter in some ways, more so how liked you are versus how well you actually do the job. Now, that being said, I believe it starts early in life. Now, Stardust has talked about the Matthew effect loop, or basically the positive reinforcement aspect of life, where the more positive an experience is, the more positive feedback basically that you have, the more successful that you will be at something. So, for instance, if you try out for a baseball team, say you're trying out for your middle school or high school baseball team, and you're not doing well, you're not getting the fundamentals down, the chances of you sticking with that and, practicing enough and doing the techniques enough to get better dwindle the less successful you are at it. Whereas if you have a natural raw talent, your raw talent naturally gravitates you towards that thing that you're talented at. And so you have an easier time in the beginning as far as getting the fundamentals down, playing well, being a good athlete, being a good baseball player. Then you're only going to get better and better at things because your talent will allow you to put your foot into the doorway in a way that would not necessarily be possible without that. So that being said, I don't know if you guys have noticed, like, especially with kids, when kids are young, they're pretty gregarious. They go up to perfect strangers, introduce themselves, ask questions. And it's only until they've experienced, usually around about the time of pre-K, kindergarten, when they start to get around other people, because up until that point, they've mostly been at home with mom, dad, brothers, sisters, maybe had some interaction with kids on their street. But as once they get into pre-K, kindergarten, they start interacting with other kids, they start interacting with other adults. This is kind of make or break. It's interesting. At the time, you don't realize it, because how could you? You're a 4 or 5 year old kid. How could you really know or be cognizant enough or aware enough of what's going on? But looking back on it, you can kind of look and see that the foundation, particularly the social foundation, is set very early on. So you have these kids that, they get into that stage of life, and maybe they're not as fast a learner, or they get in trouble a lot, or they just maybe have trouble understanding what they're learning. You start to see, much like in a NASCAR race or something like that, where the lead cars start to pull away from the pack. And so oftentimes what happens is kids start out in these environments, they don't do very well academically. Now, any kind of aberration in the system, kind of like in a body that gets sick, there's an illness, there's a bacteria, a virus, whatever, the body then turns on the immunity responses and all that kind of stuff. So that's what happens. This kid, it's happened to a lot of kids growing up. We maybe were that kid, or one of our friends was that kid, or we just simply observed what was going on around us. But the kid becomes outcast, the kid becomes ostracized. And so then that tends to follow them into, middle school, high school. But we think, well, high school, once high school's over, we're kind of no longer at the mercy of that system. And we think, in the adult world, certainly in the job world, well, all I need to do is go out here and be good at what I do, be successful, understand, have the knowledge, training, and capability of doing the job. And that's all that's going to. What tends to actually happen is a lot of these places, and there are certain occupations where you really can kind of be closed off and kind of hermit like, and I mean, as long as you're top notch, good at your job, there are some occupations, though very few, where likability, it's not that it's not important. I mean, from my experience and from my observation, it's pretty important. Even if some of these occupations, it's important to a small degree, but for the most part, most of us are going to be working in places or doing careers, jobs, whatever. Which I don't even know that a career exists anymore for most people. I think they exist, but I think careers more so exist for people middle management and up. Middle management and up, you can actually say you're on like a career path, progression, whatever. But nowadays, it seems like no matter what you do as a job, I mean, if you exchange time and labor for money, it's a job. If there's some upward mobility with that time and labor, then it's a career. Most of us are not going to be in careers because, well, I'm not saying that we won't be in careers, but there's a limited amount of careers to be had versus jobs. So, but that's kind of the thing. So, but you figure, you spent 12 years now, not really developing the social skills the way that you should have. Difficulty looking people in the eye, just all around not wanting to be around people because of the negative experiences that you've had either with teachers or students, peers, that kind of thing. And so now you're going into the corporate world, or you're going into a job, whatever it is, government, whatever. And the same kind of difficulties are going to arise because the people that are going to get promoted, the people that are going to be on these career progression paths, are the likable people. It's going to be the people that the boss likes. It's going to be the people that their boss's boss likes, because you are the face of whatever. And it doesn't matter how good you are at something or how skilled you are at something. As a matter of fact, it might backfire in some way that you are so good at something and are so knowledgeable without that likability key. Because one of two things is going to happen: either people in positions to screw you over are going to resent that because you're making them look bad and you're making them worried about their position in the company, or you're going to do all this work, you're going to, basically be the backbone of this place and get none of the credit for it. So that's something that I may have mentioned before. That's something that I've thought about quite a bit because it's kind of a kicking against the pricks, so to speak. On the one hand, very much so with MGTOW is very much this independent mindset, individualist mindset. But ultimately, it is going to kind of have a negative effect on your career progression, and it's going to torpedo a lot of opportunities. But on the other hand, I've also noticed that the older you get, the less you care about any of that. Aging tends to be directly related to less tolerance for BS and honestly flakes. I mean, all I want to do is go to work, make my money, go home, and be left alone, essentially. I feel like family obviously is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing in life. And really, there's not really a whole lot worth getting worked up over, and certainly not people that you work with or work for. I mean, you should try to get along with people insofar as you can, but realize most people are flakes and most people are snakes. You know, the key, I think, and what MGTOW at its core is to find out what you're about and then remain true to that. And a lot of the reason why these people are snakes and flakes is because they're living in fear. And I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but I mean, I've had actual conversations with coworkers. Man, I'm afraid to get written up. I'm afraid uh, to upset this person because if I do, that's they're just gonna make I'm gonna have to switch jobs or I'm gonna have to switch positions or whatever because this person is just gonna make my life miserable. I mean, just absolutely terrible. Like kids afraid of the dark, man. Like that kind of terror. And so, what do a lot of these coworkers do? Well, they inform on you, try to gather things against you. Not so much doing what they do because I'm the best at it or I'm the most informed at the job, but it's like I'm going to make myself look good by comparison, not because I'm the highest skilled person or that I have the most training or whatever, but if I can make somebody else look worse than me, then I look better, and really I'm not having to do that much. And that's been what I found out most in life. And I think people have, anybody that's been in the workforce any amount of time, I think has learned the mantra, coworkers are not your friend. And they're not. I mean, at the end of the day, they've got their family they're trying to take care of. They've got their hopes, dreams, and aspirations, their ambitions. And so that's a lot of what that living in fear for them is living in fear that they're not going to be able to provide for their family or they're not going to, get that promotion or that raise that they wanted or whatever the case may be. I'm not saying go out there and get fired or whatever, but I'm more so just warning you that the only person that has your best interest in mind is you, and it's not some person that you work with that you think, oh yeah, Johnny's cool or whatever. Obviously, the answer to all this is to exit the rat race. Exit the rat race if you can. Alan Watts, I think, once posed the question: if money was no issue, if you could do whatever you wanted to do, and you didn't have to worry about how you were going to pay for it, where the money was going to come from, what would it be? I used to have a difficult time answering that question because I think I was thinking in terms of, oh, well, I would start a radio station, or I would do this, or I would do that. But honestly, anymore, all I really want out of life is, a piece of land, a decent. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a house. I don't know if you've ever seen those travel trailer cottage things. They're real nice. I mean, they cost about as much as a house does anymore, I guess. But just something simple, simple living. Have some goats, have some chickens. Very simple, just off the grid as much as you possibly can. That's what I would do, because I don't think you need much to be happy. I don't think you need much to be at peace. I mean, if you have your health, your basic needs are met, and something that gives you meaning and purpose. And the thing that I think that we have failed at in this society and culture is we think that our job or our profession has to give us meaning and purpose. But the true question is, what are you going to do? I mean, you have to retire someday, hopefully. What are you going to do when that's gone? What happens if you get laid off, or what happens if you get injured? You can't do that line of work anymore, or you get fired, or you have to switch jobs, because the fact of the matter is that even if you don't get hurt, even if you don't retire anytime soon, you could still get screwed just because you're the wrong person at the wrong place at the wrong time. You didn't do anything, but we got to get you out of the way for whatever reason. The ability to be able to get up in the morning, look yourself in the mirror, and be satisfied at the person looking back at you is immeasurable in value. A lot of what ties us to the rat race is this never-ending pursuit of material things, never-ending pursuit of what we think the good life is. You know, we've got these commercials all trying to sell you something. You have people in your life all trying to sell you something. And to get to the end of it, to realize you never needed any of it because you had what you needed all along. There's millions of miserable millionaires out there. I mean, just look at Heath Ledger's the one that always comes to mind to me. I don't know the situation, but we all know kind of what happened with, you know, that whole deal. And so here's a guy that had it all. Here's a guy that's a millionaire. Miserable. And, you know, you see what happened to him. But then you can look at the, you know, many impoverished people around the world, but I mean, even in the United States, you know, and they seem, you know, more content than the millionaire or the movie star or whatever. And a lot of people don't think that that's possible, but I think when you understand that ultimately everything can be taken away, it's all on loan in this life. You're not taking any of it with you. So you have to enjoy and appreciate what you have. Fear is simply not knowing the future. And to me, living in fear is sometimes the worst fate possible. There's two kinds of, I guess, fear: depression and anxiety. Depression, you know, you're looking back at the past, you're looking at what happened, and perhaps in some ways wanting to change it. And then perhaps in some ways worrying about that's going to be the future going forward. Of course, anxiety is the fear of the future, the not knowing. But happiness, which I'm not a big fan of the word happiness. I think happiness is maybe not what you should shoot for, but rather contentment is living in the present moment and being appreciative for what you do have. So there's a pretty good, I've been watching his videos quite a bit lately, but he has a really good video on what fear is and how living in fear is sometimes worse than death. It's Joey the Gypsy, if anybody's interested. Check his channel out. He's got some good stuff going on. Very insightful person. And so, if you can't exit the rat race, if it's not possible, sometimes your only choice is to abide like the dude. And so, that being said, these are just some ideas, some food for thought. As always, it's been good to touch base. This past year has been busy, like I said, with the move and everything. I was out of the country for a little bit down in Cabo, not the Baja. But it's good to be back, and it's good to be making videos again, and hopefully I can maybe fill you guys in on some of the intertestamental period, so to speak, that's been going on the last couple months to a year. As always, go your own way or don't. The choice is yours.